This is Ben Proko with Training and Racing with Power. This week we're going to go over where do I want to go. So last week we covered how to get a power meter, why power is a good metric or a great metric to train with and race with, and also we gave you a basic test for helping determine your training zones. If you want more information on that first one, it will be here in the comments. I'll put it at the bottom, the link to that first video. And with that being said, let's get on to our second video here of where do I want to go. So there's lots of different uses for a power meter, but each one's a little bit different and has different strengths. There's long course triathlon, short course triathlons, mountain bike, road race, group rides, and even general health. We'll see a benefit with using a power meter. So for triathlons, and this is probably going to be the biggest portion of the audience listening to this, power meters are just great for everything. Everything from training to racing, because it's really easy to monitor what's happening on race day. That threshold test that you did, and again, that's just a basic threshold test, and we'll talk more about some other options a little bit later. You can use a percentage of your threshold to determine kind of your starting point. Training is going to really dictate the percentages you can go at here, as well as how long you're going to be on the bike course. But if you're doing, let's say, an Ironman, you'd want to target anywhere from 65 to 80% of your FTP, with the higher numbers, that higher percentage being closer to pro level, top age groupers, and then the lower being those who are going to be out there a little bit longer. In general, most people end up going around 70%. Me personally, I go around 70%. I've tried to push 75 and I just struggle running off the bike, and the power difference there is only about 10 watts between that 70 and 75% for me. 10, maybe 15, not even that much, but it's night and day difference being able to run off the bike or not. Halves, half iron, or 70.3, you'd be able to go a little bit harder there. Again, me personally, I could shoot for 85. Everything says that I can normally go there, but me being a little bit of an unsure runner, I like to shoot for 80% my FTP and just be a little bit stronger on the run. If I have anything left, a little extra energy, I'll put it in on a run, which seems to not really happen either. Next one would be Olympics. Some of you guys that are really strong runners off the bike, and you can finish that bike in an hour, you probably go close to 100% your FTP. Again, that'd be more of a tried and true thing, work your way up to that, but probably a little bit better to start at the 90% range, or if you're going to be out there for over 3 hours for the duration of the race, maybe even 85. And then sprint tries. Again, 95 to 105. I have a few people I've seen, a few of my athletes run well off of going like 103% their FTP. And again, me personally, I can't do that if I want to have a really good run off the bike. Just the extra power for me to put in there isn't worth it. And some of my best runs come closer to like the 97% range. And again, these are all individual. I have guys who run great off of 102, 103. But this gives you a good starting point. So when you're practicing, you can kind of look at this stuff after the race and see like, yeah, I do a little bit better at 98%, or I can go at 102 and it doesn't really affect my run. So this gives a lot of great data points. Mountain bike racing. Normalized power during the race is going to be your best metric to have. And even then, depending on the course, it can kind of get a little bit skewed. But if, like, let's say you have an FTP of 200, and you're starting that race, you're probably going to start out pretty hard. You're probably going to see that normalized power above that, but you got to start keeping tabs. You don't want to work so hard to stay with the group that you end up blowing up and then everyone else catches you because you went too hard at the beginning. So you can kind of check in on that normalized power early on. And I say if you're going for 200 and you see 5 minutes in you're at 230, you're probably going a little bit too hard, and it's not worth staying with that group. It also, the great thing with mountain biking is you can learn to be efficient. Let's say you have like a 6 or an 8 mile race loop that you're going to be doing. You can try to do that same race loop at just as fast. Let's say you're knocking it out in 45 minutes. See if you can get it in 45 minutes again, but use less power, both normalized and average. And that's going to be more efficient. If you can go this same speed with less power, that's just a higher efficiency. So it'd be great for figuring out how hard should you go up that climb. You're like, hey, I went harder on it this time and it really didn't pay off. I can go up a little bit easier and it ends up working out better. It might be worth having a few people pass you on a climb, and then you have a lot more in the tank at the end of the race where it really matters. But again, it's a great training tool. Road bike racing. This is also a great training tool. Using power, you can really hit your intervals the way you need to. You can go out and do those group rides, and you can analyze where you maybe have issues or on races. Most people I see do too many group rides, some of the roadies I know, and then when they really get training with power and getting some good quality intervals in, it takes our riding to a whole new level. Instead of just hanging on for the group ride, a few months later, they're pulling everyone and getting a great workout doing it, as opposed to just a hang on and suffer fest. So great post-race analysis. You can see where you cracked, where you got dropped, maybe something you did that caused some issues when the break happened or when something important happened. It is sometimes difficult to use on a race, but one of the key areas you can use it, and I have several races I could use. I just pulled up this one. It ended up being a crit with a two-person breakaway. Me and another guy broke away about halfway through here. You can see it's just all over the place, the power. I'm not really looking at it at that point. I'm just staying with a pack. There's nothing. I have to stay with them. Whatever they do, I have to be smart. I might look at my normalized power and say like, well, it's a little bit low. I can kind of put on an attack here and see what can happen. That's what we did. About halfway through, there was a prime and made an attack with another guy. We got a good gap, and it was like, hey, let's keep on going. And this is where I really did start looking at my power, because I'd go out and pull, and I knew about what power I should pull at and stay consistent. And you can see I get to the front and I kind of let it gradually drop down, and then he would go to the front and I'd get to go into recovery mode. It might be difficult to see here, but there's a little dotted line right around where my threshold is, and you can see when I'm pulling, I'm above that line, and then when I'm drafting, I'm below that line, just working to stay with him. And I just constantly do that. You can see us taking turns the whole time. And we were able to actually pull away from the pack pretty well, averaging 26.5 miles an hour for this on a windy crit course. And then it was fortunate for me. I was able to break away with him. We had a nice gap. I was able to break away with less than a quarter mile left and take the win on that. I have some other files where it's a solo breakaway, and you can see where the power is super steady, because that's what I have to do it becomes a time trial. So this is where you can use it in race, and I have a watch, but this is where a head unit would be better, because you can just kind of glance down and see what that power is at. And also for general health, group rides, you can see it'll help you just maintain your effort on those, like if you're doing something like an MS 150, keep you from going too hard up some of the hills, and just if your goal is to let's say burn fat or burn overall calories. I pulled this up. This is some of my data. You can see as the power numbers are down here on this bottom the right graph, and as I increase power, 150 all the way up to 300, there's an overall increase in energy expenditure, how many calories I'm burning. But you can see there's a point where the green, as the fat starts to go down, to where I'm burning very little fat. So most of this, your higher fat burn rates are going to happen in zone 1 and zone 2. And again, you can check that when you're creating your doing your 20-minute test and see where those points are. Some people just automatically drop off right away. I actually have a because I really do work a lot to stay in a good fat max area and be able to burn fat at a little bit higher power. It falls about a little bit above the middle of my zone 2 is my fat max, where I can burn the most fat, and it happened to be at like 500 calories an hour. Now in turn, if I went at, let's say, 270 watts, which would be really pushing, and I wouldn't be able to stay there for a super long time, but it would take me 3 hours of going at 270 watts to burn the same amount of fat that I would burn at going at 180 watts. And 180 watts, I can go there for several hours without a problem. So if your goal is to burn fat, you want to go in those easier training levels, zone 1, zone 2. And if you just want to burn overall calories, go with those higher intensities. So questions. One from last week that I got is, I heard some other field tests to determine zones. There's other field tests. The 20 minutes and taking 95% of that has been a kind of very basic and generic one. They're finding that it's not the perfect test, but there's not many perfect tests. My favorite test to honestly know where my threshold is and it lines up really well is a blood lactate test. But some of these other field tests might have you do a couple of all-out efforts right before, and then you'll do your 20-minute test, but you're at a fatigue state. And that probably works. I haven't tried that one per se, and then you might take 98% of it as opposed to 95% of it. Again, with all these field tests, they're all about going all out, and that's sometimes difficult to do, and that's why I like using a blood lactate, because I don't really have to go all out at any point. I just have to be at my threshold for roughly 5 minutes to take the sample, and then I'm good to go after that. So there are different ways, and I use several different ways just to double check and see what's working. All right, like last time, if you have any questions on this video, please hit me up on TriFitXT Facebook page or benproco@hotmail.com. This is the second video. We'll have one more video kind of wrapping it all up, and I'm titling that, How Do I Get There? So giving you kind of some intervals to help guide you to getting the results that you want with using a power meter. So I hope this was helpful. And again, if you want access to that first video, I'll put that down in the comments here. And feel free to share this with others. I just want to help people out with using power and seeing the benefits of it. All right, have a good one.